Imagine living a mediocre life, a high school student with a simple routine whose hobbies are playing video games and reading manhwa in his spare time. Until one day, he finds himself lost in a completely different world far from his usual reality. But unlike most people, our protagonist ends up enjoying this situation, because he's finally living the isekai life that every good old otaku dreams of. But just when he thought things would go well, using his magical powers to live out adventures, things start to fall apart as the world he's in isn't that friendly, and his dreams of a grand magical journey are about to go downhill fast. Our story begins with the protagonist tied up, and is about to be subdued by someone. The executioner says they are going back to square one. That frightens the young man. Reading the file, the hooded figure says the boy's name is Kim Seo-jun, 20 years old, from a country called South Korea on the planet Earth. Also, his favorite entertainment is playing FPS games, and he hates any dessert with matcha flavor. Our boy is deeply frightened. Then the hooded man strikes, staining the boy with blood and leaving him even more terrified. The hooded figure asks if the protagonist is deaf, and says he can help with that by enlarging his ear canal. Next, the executioner claims that Kim can heal much better, and asks again, demanding a precise answer. Then he brings up the second princess, Natania, saying the one who eliminated her is the warrior named Kim Seo-jun, and asks if the boy in front of him is that person. Hearing that, the protagonist wonders when it all went wrong, when his normal life came to an end. His name is indeed Kim Seo-jun, a freshman still in school. Nothing out of the ordinary for a student from South Korea. Even his family is quite normal with a simple life. So no one would suspect anything unusual about Kim. However, on a certain day as he was leaving home, our protagonist came across an elf and a group of rather strange people that left Kim quite confused because he didn't even know where he was. Little did he know that at that moment, he would become one of the 4 warriors of that yet unknown world. Alongside him, 3 others appeared, another high school student, a child, and an older man. Kim Seo-jun was chosen to complete the quartet. But unlike the others, he got excited, declaring that now he would finally be the protagonist of a fantasy story in a parallel world. He believed he would get to choose weapons and skills to help him in his adventures. He even shouted aloud for his status window to appear, but that only made him look crazy in front of the others. The elf quickly explained that, unfortunately, they don't have status windows there, but they do have skills. She says her name is Princess Natania, and she's happy to work with these new warriors. But first, she wants to check the skills they possess. The first to be evaluated is Kim. Her reaction when using the device on him is rather alarming, and the princess says he has the skill of storage. But before she could say more, her guards are all taken down, and she herself becomes the next target. As a mysterious shadow attacks her, wounding the princess right in front of them, Kim is shocked by the scene. As the fist of the mysterious figure pierced through the princess's body as if it were nothing. Gravely wounded, the princess tries to say something, but due to her injury, she can't. The protagonist is still extremely confused and stunned. Then the mysterious creature finishes its task and kills Natania right before his eyes. Seeing all that fluid pouring from her body, Kim doesn't know how to react. He simply freezes in fear as the creature approaches him. The humanoid shadow gets close to Kim and places its hands on him. When he finally regained consciousness among those who were still alive, Kim was the only one of the 3 summoned warriors who was covered in blood. Not only that, but he also had an electronic collar around his neck. One that suppresses a person's magical powers. The protagonist realizes that he and the others are being taken to a prison called Gehenna. One of the guards leading the prisoners says that the protagonist has bad luck because is being taken to the public prison built 7,000 meters above the ground, home to the most despicable people in this world. Kim grows anxious, saying that a regular high schooler like Kim should be enjoying the best this new world has to offer, just like in the stories he usually reads. But the opposite is happening, and he says this just isn't right. And he wonders what will become of his life from now on. He doesn't even know what happened to his previous life and asks himself if he died or something like that. In any case, he is lined up with the other prisoners. A woman introduces herself as the warden of Gehenna prison. She says that just by looking at the prisoners, she feels disgusted. She also says that by the looks on their faces, they don't seem to feel any remorse for their sins, but she's not surprised as she says they are the cancer of this society. Therefore, they must open their eyes and see their new reality from now on. Because this place is home to maniacs, a demon lord general, and a vampire out for revenge, the warden says there's literally no way to escape from there. And among all the prisoners, there's one who catches her attention. She approaches the protagonist and says he has piqued her interest. Hearing this, Kim becomes even more desperate. In any case, the warden says not to forget her or else they might end up dead. One of the prisoners starts mumbling. Soon, the warden asks if he has something to say. The prisoner says yes and begins to insult her. Immediately, the warden destroys him in front of everyone. She says she forgot to mention something and states that the reason she was chosen to be the warden is because she's incredibly strong. So if they want to live properly in Gehenna, they'll have to behave because she's sure the others don't want to die like that last prisoner. After being taken to the cell, a guard says he wants to start by hearing Kim Seo admit the crime he committed and says they'll return to square one. He also says he'll ask a question and expects honest answers. The interrogator says that Princess Natania was killed and asks if the one who eliminated her is Kim Seo-jun. However, the protagonist doesn't respond. Soon, the warden says he's unwilling to admit his guilt and she's almost certain the hallucination ability is working perfectly but asks if Kim is resilient because of his mental strength. Speaking of him, the protagonist tries to stay strong and says he is not guilty. He can't stand the pain anymore until he screams that he's innocent. And a burst of energy manifests within him, breaking the chains that held him, which surprises the interrogator and even the prison warden. It's surprising even to Kim himself. He not only broke free, but also healed the injuries caused by extreme suffering. So he imagines this must be due to his ability. The warden says he was being subjected to hallucination-induced suffering, yet still managed to free himself, and she doesn't think this is due to a normal ability. She says it's due to his storage-type ability. The interrogator speaks up and says it might not be exactly that. He says it's probably because of the loose collar since he had to get the hallucination ability to work correctly on the prisoner's brain. In turn, Kim says he's been subjected to extreme suffering for a while and on top of that, he was drugged. So he asks if they are insane. He also asks if human rights don't exist in this world. The warden says that in the past, there was a race with 2 horns on their foreheads. They all lived in a small village. It was an ordinary village with about 300 people, very peaceful. But one day, someone from Earth showed up, and it was a warrior, a single warrior who crossed into this world. Then 257 people died that day. That warrior's ability was called God Mode, a skill that allowed the use of console game commands. Before the warden tore that guy's limbs off and left only his head, he said all he had to do was say one thing, force exit. She says Earthlings tend to treat this world like a video game map or a fantasy story. And because of that, this world became a mess, eliminating people while calling it field training, using them while calling it an approach attempt. Then she asks if the protagonist's heart didn't break when he neutralized the second princess and if he doesn't feel any guilt. In turn, Kim says he didn't eliminate her, and that's a false accusation, claiming he had nothing to gain from doing so. But the warden doesn't believe his words and kicks Kim Seo-jun. She tells him to listen carefully to what she's about to say and says the most important thing in Gehenna is admitting guilt for what you've done. Innocent or guilty, it's not their job to find out the truth after all. Gehenna is just a penal institution. The director says her job is not to focus on details, but rather to correct and teach the prisoners. Therefore, the warrior Kim Seo-jun must get used to this world. With that, Kim is thrown into his cell after getting beaten up by the director. The protagonist thinks that life in this world isn't easy and doesn't find it much different from the life he had on Earth. The only difference is that on Earth, he had someone he cared about. While in this world, he has no friends, let alone family. His only companion is solitude and nothing more. At least, that's what he believed until now, because shortly after, he sees Princess Natania in front of him. Kim asks how she got there. The princess simply smiles and asks if he would like to leave this place. Kim wonders what this is, if it's an illusion, but his eyes tell him it seems very real. So he holds the princess's hand and realizes it's really her. Then Kim sees that she is alive, though he doesn't know how since he saw her die with his own eyes. He says he's curious about how she survived and how she got there. But either way, he feels happy that she's standing in front of him, because that proves he wasn't the one responsible for what happened to her, and the princess might even help him prove his innocence. Kim even asks her to do that for him. However, the princess tells the protagonist that there's no way to prove his innocence. Kim asks why not. He doesn't quite understand what the princess is saying. Natania says there are several reasons. The first, she wants to show him something. The protagonist sees the princess transforming. Natania changes her physical form and says that indeed she is no longer in the plane of the living in her physical body. So what Kim is seeing is her ethereal form in which the soul is the core and the body is made of mana. People can't see her unless they are from Earth, and she doesn't have enough mana to use her abilities in this state. But there is something more important. She asks if Kim remembers the face of the true culprit. Thinking about it, Kim doesn't remember the face of the real culprit, not even of the other 3 warriors who were witnesses. As if part of that memory had been erased, it's said that they not only infiltrated and breached the security of the nation's most important building, but also eliminated the princess in her court. They also escaped easily and pinned the blame on Kim Seo-jun. That's why she believes it makes no sense to reveal to the public that she's still alive when there's no information about the real culprit. The protagonist then asks what he should do. He doesn't like hearing that he can't do anything after all. It was the princess herself who asked if he wanted to escape, so now he wants to know what he should do. Because eventually, the one who will be executed, the one who risked his life is him. Kim says he was arbitrarily summoned to this world, then unjustly accused and subjected to extreme suffering. So he wants to know if there's a way to get out of prison or not. The princess says there is no way out as an innocent man, and there's no way to escape. But yes, there is a way to get out. She says this is a maximum security prison, and no skilled or powerful person has ever managed to escape. The next day, Kim is subjected to another interrogation session. The interrogator asks what he has to say and removes Kim's gag. Then Kim says he eliminated the princess and her magical court. This makes Kim feel terrible. After being subjected to extreme suffering and drug exposure for 2 days, he had to confess to an act he never committed. The interrogator enjoys hearing Kim's confession, saying they can now move forward, and says he'll explain what awaits him. Soon, he introduces Amber from the patrol team. Kim wasn't expecting that. Amber says she's glad to finally meet the person responsible for eliminating the princess, but says he looks nothing like the rumors claimed. She says he must be uncomfortable with the shackles and releases Kim's arms. Then she says it's a pleasure to meet him and claims that Kim must feel the same. The guard tells Amber to stop the small talk as she must take him away and to show him that on the way. Amber then puts the collar and new shackles on Kim. After that, she removes him from the interrogation room. Kim asks what's going on. Amber says the interrogation is over. She says that the most important thing in Gehenna is for the prisoner to confess what they did because those who came to this place are all human waste to begin with. So it makes sense if someone like Kim can't endure the suffering or something like that and survive. But she says that the moment he admits it, he won't be able to refuse anything. Kim doesn't quite understand, but becomes very frightened. She says it would be quite troublesome if someone considered lost tried to rebel. Now she wants to talk about something else. Although the veteran already mentioned it before, she introduces herself as Amber from the patrol team. The patrol team is made up of elite guards with the highest combat skills, and they are as good as most cheaters. Amber is responsible for the section where Kim will be imprisoned. It means that if he causes a scene, it will be Amber who will neutralize him. Shortly after, they arrive at a place and she says this is what she wanted to show Kim. When he sees what Amber reveals, he is shocked because a person stored in a tube is something he had never seen before. Not just one, but an entire section of them is stored there. Amber says this is what execution means in Gehenna. Kim asks if all these people are being used as batteries. Amber says this is called extraction because from those bodies, mana is extracted as well as their abilities. She also says that people are the most important resource there since the prisoners of Gehenna have very special abilities, which is reason enough for their imprisonment. She heard from the captain that Kim's ability is also quite special and unique, so she's only sharing this because she's kind. After returning to his cell, the princess asks what he intends to do now. Kim asks if there's another alternative. Natania says that a harsh sentence is still certain and decides since Kim is from Earth, hiring a lawyer to defend him is out of the question. The protagonist says that even so, escaping is simply impossible and asks how he, a mere person, can escape such a prison. The princess says she'll tell a story to motivate him and says it goes without saying that the moment Kim stepped into this world, time on Earth did not stop. Let's say it's been a month since he arrived here. That means a month has passed since then in Earth's timeline. Exactly the same amount of time has passed on Earth's timeline. She asks if his family and friends won't come looking for him. The protagonist gets irritated by the question and says that all of this is the princess's fault since she's the one who summoned him. Natania says that's exactly what she's saying and asks if Kim is going to just sit there doing nothing. She also says that the answers are already with him because Kim has the choice to give up and wither away in prison or escape and return to Earth. So if he decides to escape, the princess states she will help him. The protagonist then calms down and says he understands what she means. Even though he doesn't fully trust Natania, he declares that he wants to escape this world and will accept her help to return home. At another moment, Amber says that's all for today. A man says he might be able to earn 75 points today. Until Amber asks if he really thinks he could neutralize her, the man says yes. Not only that, but he believes he deserves the point. Amber then thanks the man for today's guidance. Although he said this many times, the man says he really likes Amber's ability to predict everything. However, he says that her body still can't match the ability of her eyes, and her weakness is only being able to focus on a single target during combat. Amber says she just realized that. That's why it's important to know the pros and cons of your abilities, or else who knows, even that bear might return as a sword in a real battle. She asks if the captain likes bears and if she should buy him a teddy bear because she can buy one during her vacation later. The captain says there's no need changing the subject. Amber asks why the prison warden isn't there. He says he doesn't know. She must have been called for something more important and might be found later. Amber then asks if neither the warden nor the captain will be present. He says yes and asks if she doesn't find that a little suspicious because they'll be summoned as soon as the warrior Kim Seo-jun surrenders, and since internal matters of Gehenna are also leaking. The captain believes there is a traitor inside Gehenna. Back to the protagonist, he thinks that the execution of the escape plan is today, and he wonders if this is really happening. Just the number of guards on duty is around 20 people, and all of them are armed. So he wonders, do guns also exist in this world? Kim says the guard is holding a rifle with magical runes, probably capable of shooting from 50 meters away. Natania, in turn, starts drawing attention, and Kim asks what she's doing. She tells him to stay quiet because no one can see her except Kim, so he must focus and listen carefully. She says that in 30 minutes, they will end their surveillance. There will be an ambush while they are taking Kim back to his cell, and she says he must be ready for what's coming. The protagonist thinks there's no guarantee that doing this is the only way. However, this is the only way to be completely free from the severe punishment, and this is his choice. A guard checks to see if Kim's size is normal and says he'll remove this control device for about 3 minutes to measure the strength and purpose of his ability. Then he says that if Kim approaches the guards during that time, they'll have permission to eliminate him immediately. He then tells him to step in and move quickly. The protagonist feels quite nervous until he arrives in the room being escorted by the prison guards. One of them tells Kim Seo-jun to step forward. Natania says that apparently they are checking Kim's abilities to assign him a task or some kind of special management, but she says he's never used his ability correctly. So she tells Kim to shout the name of his ability to activate it and imagine that he has another finger and touch it. Now she tells him to go and that she'll be waiting since there's a sensor nearby. Storage ability. Thinking about it, Kim realizes he never really knew how to use it. Either way, one of the guards tells him to stand still right in the center of the platform. After that, he tells Kim to try using his ability on the training dummy, but he has no idea how to do it. Still, he wants to try as the princess instructed, so he shouts the name of his ability. However, nothing happens and the ability is not activated. The guard asks what he's doing and tells him to hurry up. Kim thinks it's his first time doing this, so they should be a bit more understanding. First, he knows this ability doesn't work from a distance, and he believes that simply shouting the name isn't the way to activate it. So he tries to imagine having another finger trying to touch and activate the ability. That way, he gets a result and is surprised by what he sees. Through his eyes, he sees a list of items like a system screen. Not only that, but the inventory doesn't seem to have limits. It appears to be infinite. The guard says he was expecting something impressive since he had never heard that ability name before, but it turned out to be a bad space-based ability. Kim is certain this is a regular inventory like in games. Usually, in manhwas, the protagonists tend to have excellent abilities, but something bothers him. Before, when he was testing his abilities, Princess Natania was smiling. Different from now where she has a blank expression. That's awkward, but he doesn't think he disappointed her. He imagines it might simply be because it's an ability she's never heard of, or maybe there's something about this storage ability that he doesn't know. The guard tells Kim to return the dummy to its original state, and then his ability test will be over. Kim wonders whether he should choose something from the list or not, but he can't even click on the system with his hands. A guard wonders what's going on with Kim because it looks like it's his first time using his ability. A prisoner appears and says that's exactly the case. The guard is startled to see a prisoner loose and near him. But before he can do anything, she attacks him. Wounded, the guard falls to the ground. He begs for his life, but the prisoner isn't in the mood to talk and finishes the guard off without a second thought. The other guards take a while to notice it. But shortly after, they witness another of their colleagues being taken down right before their eyes, and they prepare to shoot at the prisoner. The protagonist sees this and asks the princess what's going on, because he thought the plan would only be carried out after the skill analysis process ended. In turn, Natania says she doesn't know that person, and this is not part of her plan. The prisoner is acting on her own. She causes a massive explosion in the area, and apparently, she's enjoying all of this. About 10 minutes earlier, a guard approaches his friend and asks if he's eating again already. He also says he ended up cutting himself while messing around. His friend asks if he caught a cold too, because it seems they are in the cold season. Then his friend suddenly collapses to the ground, coughing up blood. The guard even tries to call for help, but the same thing happens to him. Soon, he has no idea what's going on. However, his time is short, and he collapses to the ground unconscious. The dark force that knocked him out emerges from the guard's body smiling, and says it feels nauseated after being inside that unpleasant guy's body. His friend Daffel says that's a petty complaint and comments that Apico is certainly ambitious with her goals. Meanwhile, the prisoners were being led to the monitoring room. Their handcuffs were being removed because they were about to have their abilities tested. One particular prisoner had other plans in mind. She carefully analyzed the environment before acting and mapped out the guards' locations. Upon seeing one of the shadow entities rise from the floor, she immediately knew everything was going according to plan. Soon, she ordered it to stealthily approach her quietly without drawing attention. Then she called one of the guards saying she needed to go to the bathroom and asked if she could go, but the guard said she had to go through inspection first. Only afterward could she go to the bathroom. Seeing her reaction, the guard said she must be up to something and had her plans ruined. He then ordered her to kneel. So the prisoner found herself cornered and said she'd been exposed, ordering the shadows to attack. The guard was completely confused, but soon the shadows began to manifest and neutralize everyone around. She broke free from the handcuffs that bound her and ran away from the others until one of the guards started chasing her. The prisoner realized the guard was very fast. Even when his comrades were eliminated before his eyes, he still ran straight to attack her. But she said that's what makes risking one's life worthwhile. After that, she spotted a mana suppression collar, but she wasn't captured by it. Right after, attacks came her way, and she didn't know what to do. Several shots were fired in her direction. The guards who were still standing kept shooting. Smoke covered a large part of the area, and from it emerged the prisoner, mocking the guards. They were furious at her provocation and fired even more shots, but it was useless as the girl wasn't hit. Instead of striking her, the bullets began floating around her. Ironically, she said it was truly breathtaking. The guards couldn't understand how that was possible because space was warping and the bullets didn't hit her. Soon, the leader ordered everyone to retreat because the prisoner was about to strike back. Just as he said, the girl was using her abilities to retaliate against the guards' attacks. And with a single command, she returned the shots, hitting all the guards in front of her at once. She went up to one of them and grabbed the blade, saying that now she wanted to go after Kim Seo-jun. Speaking of him, the protagonist is in shock at what he just witnessed. Unlike the girl who's clearly having fun, she says she's really tired and asks why no one helped her. One of the shadows says someone had to watch the show. Kim wonders what's going on because he knows this wasn't part of Natania's plan. Either way, he thinks the path is clear now. There aren't just one, but two sides trying to free him from the false accusation and the prison sentence he received. Unlike him, Natania thinks this situation doesn't seem all that good. The relentless prisoner approaches and tells Kim not to be scared because she's there to free him, and she doesn't intend to hurt him or anything like that. The princess tells Kim Seo-jun to follow her for now. Then she says Kim doesn't need to worry about anything. The shadow calls her Apico and says they don't have much time. They need to get out in 3 minutes max. Apico says she knows that and she's not an idiot. She formally introduces herself to the protagonist and says he must follow her if he wants to escape. So Kim does, but is shocked by the number of corpses on the ground. Apico asks if he's scared just by that. Ken realizes that to her, this is not scary at all, which makes it seem like she's used to this kind of situation, and he considers backing out. But Apico says her mother used to do something when she was little. Then she tells Kim to close his eyes and hold her hand, claiming that it will be less scary that way. However, the protagonist disagrees because he's too scared to calm down so easily. The shadow tells Apico that every second is precious and she shouldn't be playing around. Amber appears and the shadow tells her not to come any closer. She says she can't touch a shadow and he should know that. The shadow says that all shadows share the same vision, so Amber is underestimating his abilities. Amber says that's because it's her first time doing this. The shadow tries to strike her with a melee attack. In turn, Amber thinks the enemy's movement is magical and fluid. The punch thrown is a feint, and the real attack comes from another direction. Not only that, but this body is also fake, and the real one is actually the shadow on the ground. With that, the shadow tells Apico that the enemy has demon eyes, and her ability allows her to see the mana in his body. Amber manages to counter the shadow and slices it in half. Kim and Apico are left frightened. Amber approaches and sees the two of them and says she just has one more intruder to deal with. Amber stares at the two prisoners and sees that they are together, but she doesn't understand why Kim is with this girl. Honestly, she doesn't get it because according to the information, this must be the work of a traitor inside Gehenna. So she starts to wonder who the intruder is, or she considers that it could be something else. There's more than one side trying to get Kim Seo out of prison, so Amber doesn't understand what's happening. The princess thinks that if they're not Earthlings, they shouldn't be able to see her and wonders if they are seeing her through some magic distortion. She finds it really annoying, someone who possesses mana abilities. Amber, in turn, says that for now, she'll put Kim Seo-jun on the back burner. She launches her attack, leaving the protagonist aside, and heads toward Apico. Apico thinks she's being attacked from a difficult angle to deal with precisely because the lower half of her opponent's body is a snake. Amber attacks with an energy sword and keeps intensifying her attacks. Meanwhile, Apico dodges the blows. Amber thinks the attacks are barely missing and concludes that the girl has a defense-type ability, and perhaps that form is related to spatial manipulation. She's moving one step faster, so Amber can see the mana she can use through her mana abilities. Suddenly, the protagonist tries to use his abilities and is surprised himself as he didn't believe he'd be able to. Beyond that, he sees they are quite fast and can't be human. The princess says they have perfect powers and techniques. That's due to the mana control they possess. She also says this serves as a reference for the hero to get used to abilities and mana, and that even the hero must at least do that. Apico says she's going to finish this in 2 minutes before Gehenna's reinforcements arrive, but there won't be much mana left. Shortly after, the battle between them intensifies. Both girls are using their powers and the energy released by both is quite intense. Amber stares at her opponent with a cold look. Meanwhile, an attack approaches her, but she manages to defend herself easily. Apico tries to strike from the rear, but Amber notices and defends in time. Apico realizes Amber can see everything and wonders if spatial distortion is her ability. Not only that, but she says Amber is releasing mana deliberately. For her, it's hard on this side because of the cost-benefit and efficiency ratio. Amber, on the other hand, is at the peak of her powers. As she approaches, she leaves Apico quite scared. And upon attacking, a massive energy explosion occurs. Kim, upon seeing that, is extremely impressed and wonders what kind of martial art that is. Now he starts to understand what Natania was talking about. While Amber unleashes great techniques to the left and right, Apico with enhanced mana uses minimal mana release and skills. Natania says there are differences in ability types. Normally, users of territorial abilities consume more mana. On the other hand, the Snake Girl uses very little. Kim thinks that beyond that, unlike Amber, who might deplete her power in a large-scale battle, Apico and he are in a situation where they need leftover magical power if they want to escape Gehenna. It's extremely disadvantageous to join the fight, so he wants to know more about mana. Natania says he still can't make a rational decision and still can't release mana. Kim says that she has a storage ability too, and he knows this isn't just a regular inventory. Natania says that the end of this fight isn't about subjugating or surrendering and asks if Kim is ready to get his hands dirty. The protagonist replies that whether he likes it or not, he's already at the center of the incident. Now there's nothing else he can do, and he must prepare for what's to come. Seeing such determination, Natania is surprised. She says that detection abilities, especially mana-related abilities, are powers that let you see only mana. In this world, even ordinary objects contain a small amount of mana. So for users of mana abilities, literally everything is visible. In turn, Amber thinks that her opponent's strategy is a tactic that drains life slowly, a type that compensates for low firepower with frequent attacks. Also, the ability can't distort actual objects. Back to the fight, Apico is having a hard time because the battle is getting more and more intense. While she fights in close combat, Amber uses her energized sword until at a certain moment, Apico is struck on the shoulder. She gets a little off balance. Amber says she finally managed to hit her and asks if her opponent has reached her limit. Apico doesn't respond, so Amber says it's time for her to die. Apico says the biggest advantage and disadvantage of mana abilities is that everything is visible because the amount of information the brain has to process, both for combat and daily life, is so overwhelming it can become disruptive. That's why mana users impose restrictions on their abilities. After that, she counterattacks and directs several rocks toward her opponent. Amber asks what she's trying to do, claiming it won't work. Then she dodges all the projectiles and says that's her biggest advantage. After that, she charges forward saying this is the end. Apico says her opponent minimized the amount of information for combat and says she can't see the mana of ordinary objects. Right after, Amber is struck directly by debris. Apico says that before throwing stones at her, she set a trap without her opponent noticing. She also says she's referring to the part where she abandoned her position during the fight. Amber in turn is left on the ground, unable to move. Natania asks if Kim thinks he'll be useful. He can't say for sure, but says he'll try to help anyway. Kim thinks that once Amber is defeated, the restrictions on his magic eye ability will be lifted since she can't afford to be hit again. However, the excess information might be a hindrance in battle. It's clear that the overload of abilities, meaning maintaining minimal restriction, is necessary. There must be a way to attack outside the restrictive field of vision, and Kim wonders what mana's weakness is. Still on the ground, Amber says she's surprised that her abilities were overcome. She admits she lost. Not only that, but she's broken bones and feels a strong pain in her stomach. That's why she says now it's time for her final move. Apico gets seriously alarmed by this, but Amber says she'll use her ability overload. With that, she begins to energize and a powerful energy source bursts from Amber. She says ability overload literally means imposing a burden to increase the ability's output. The overload of her demonic eye ability with the lowest limit her brain can withstand amplifies the mana several times to expand her field of vision. Apico thinks the sustainable time is about 15 seconds. With her current vision, she can see a bit into the future, but that's still not enough to prevent herself from being attacked. Amber is far more furious now and is striking with much greater intensity. The blows she lands hurt Apico to the point of rendering her helpless, but this strength from Amber is temporary. After the overload is released, she will lose her vision temporarily. Because of that, Apico wonders if she should overload her own abilities too. But she concludes that there's no future ahead unless she acts, so she decides to strike back and manages to land a hit directly on Amber. But the attack doesn't have the expected effect because there's a power clash, and they are thrown in opposite directions. Apico thinks it's good that the recoil from the rapid space distortion increased the distance, but the damage is still very serious. So she needs to reassess the situation. Meanwhile, Amber continues her attacks. Amber says she saw the shape and direction of the space distortion, something like catching a ride from the angle she's flying in, and she claims that it's an easy task. But before she can finish off her opponent, the protagonist intervenes in the fight. He uses his ability to attack and stops Amber from continuing to fight. The serpent woman is in shock because she definitely wasn't expecting that. Kin says that when retrieving items stored with his ability, the items that overlap in the same spot disappear, and he learned something. Natania kept wondering what he was thinking and concludes that's why he had been moving stealthily since earlier. The weakness of mana abilities is setting a target. The snake girl prioritized the cat girl and excluded the hero from her vision. The hero wasn't visible. The hero's adaptation is faster than expected. Amber says so that's the weakness of mana abilities after all, and she couldn't overcome it because she was inexperienced. Soon after, she falls dead to the ground. Kim, in turn, is the one responsible for it. Seeing what he did, he thinks this was his choice. The moment he chose escape as his path, his way forward was stained with blood, and he'll do anything to return to Earth and escape this world. Apico says that apparently there are no more guards, so they should be able to get out through the entrance she came from. She asks if there's something Kim is worried about. He says he was just grabbing his weapon, but Kim is a little bothered by the situation. Apico says she freed other prisoners before entering the test room. By now, they are probably dragging someone else in there. Meanwhile, she and Kim can move through the escape route. Kim asks who exactly she is and why she's risking her life to save him. Apico says she can't say much right now, but to a group, Kim is the key. The protagonist doesn't quite understand what that means. Natania explains, saying that there's something very important locked away, and Kim is the only one who can unlock it, the key. That leaves him truly shocked. In any case, Apico says the corridors on this floor are probably already in chaos, so they need to find another way out. She says they are heading up and shows Kim where she's going to take him. After that, she tells him to hold on, then she takes him upward. Kim doesn't just sit back. He also uses his abilities. Apico says he seems to be getting the hang of his ability. Kim says he's used it a few times, so he's already getting used to it. She tells Kim not to relax just because they've reached the upper floor. About 5 minutes have passed, so there will likely be armed guards on the upper levels. So she tells him to follow her and keep running while she breaks the barriers. The protagonist gets ready to run until he notices Natania retreating, and he doesn't understand why she's pulling back. Until Apico grabs him and says there's no time. They can't stop. She says they are about to isolate the area where the commotion is happening, so if they go in different directions, they won't be able to escape. Kim asks what she means. Apico says it's a skill that can find space-time. The mobile patrol teams in Gehenna also have such abilities. On the other side, other prisoners are fighting the guards, but they are not doing well. One of them shot at the guards, but he doesn't even try to defend himself much. An ally says all the other guards have already been evacuated, so he asks if they should head to Grammar-Port. He also says the prisoners are the ones causing all this mess, and if they keep acting like this, there will be no choice but to eliminate them all. One of the prisoners transforms into a monster and tries to attack him, but the guard uses a magic shield and protects himself from the creature. He tells the others to protect themselves properly. This is a consequence of ability overload. The spatial separation operation has been completed, and he asks the communicator if the two of them are performing well. In response, another guard says that on his end, everything is also complete and requests the recovery of the bodies. By the way, he asks if this could be a coincidence since both the director and the commander were absent when the incident occurred. The leader of the guard says no because he believes this was completely orchestrated. Then the other says it really is the work of a traitor and asks Cecilia what happened regarding the whereabouts of the other escaped prisoners. Cecilia says it's strange because the location of each of them is completely different. It must be some ability because someone must be interfering with the information. Back to the protagonist, he says they need to avoid combat. Apico says she used up a lot of mana during the previous fight, and she says that first, if Kim makes a hole in the wall, it must distort the escape ability. A possessed guard says that Hell has cleared all the corridors. Upon hearing this, Kim finds it strange. Apico asks if it was really Hell who did that. Kim doesn't understand, but she says that Daffel is a friend of hers and also mentions that she can't control an infected target for more than a day. After that, all the infected guards relay the information Apico needs until one of them approaches the girl and says he is what she asked for. The protagonist asks what it is. She says it's a magical artifact meant to bypass the prison's auto-fire defense and tells Kim to keep the item. After that, they go to a room that leads to an exit. Then they manage to reach the ship hangar, and Kim finds himself in front of a supply skimmer. Apico says that due to Gehenna's massive size and its nature as an aerial prison, each building operates supply airships on the top floor, specifically for material supply since it's the only opening in Gehenna, making it impossible for other prisoners besides them to get there. Kim wonders if he'll finally be able to escape because he wants to get out of that damn prison, but he remembers Natania and wonders why she suddenly left. One of the previous guards shows up and says he now understands what happened since Apico was controlling the minds of the guards. Like a virus, it spreads and activates after a certain period of time, which makes it very difficult to obtain accurate information. So he says he'll neutralize everyone and should suggest the mental barrier magic device to the warden. Apico panics when she sees Kim in danger, but she can't do anything because the protagonist is already under attack. The guard tries to use his powers against him, but Kim defends himself with his own powers. With that, the guard is surprised as he wasn't expecting that. He says that Kim is the one with the storage ability, but adds that he can't store flying projectiles too. Right after, the protagonist feels something because the sweat on his body freezes as it falls. The guard says that's right, since his ability is to freeze and eliminate anyone. Earlier, the Ice Lord approached a guard named Caleb, saying he was responsible for the lower floors. He says he heard that Caleb has been training a knight recently. He also says he read Kim Seo-jun's report recently, and there's something peculiar in it. Because he finds it strange that Kim supposedly eliminated Princess Natania and everyone in the palace instantly, yet doesn't remember it. Furthermore, according to his statement, there was another person at the scene. Killer claims there's solid evidence that Kim is guilty and points to the mana trace as proof. That trace is like a fingerprint with unique characteristics and different colors depending on the individual. So all the mana traces found at the scene point to Kim Seo-jun. That's enough for Killip to believe Kim is just a lunatic. He mentions Kim being in the mobile unit and asks why he's seen him more than once. With that, the Ice Lord says he understands now. Kim is just another ordinary madman. Back to the present, he attacks Kim. The protagonist uses his abilities and tries to defend against the attack. He even manages to dodge one, but the projectile curves mid-air and still manages to hit him even though he dodged. Apico rushes over and asks if Kim is okay. But when she touches him, she realizes Kim is freezing cold. As cold as an ice cube, the protagonist can barely move and even starts bleeding from the intense cold. In turn, the Ice Lord isn't satisfied and says he can neutralize his opponent without even laying a finger on him. Then he fires another of his freezing projectiles, but this time, it doesn't hit because a portal opened near the prisoners and through it, the two manage to escape. Upon seeing this, the Ice Lord wonders if this is some kind of imperial conspiracy or something because something like that shouldn't happen in a neutral zone like Gehenna. Right after, he's attacked from a distance but manages to defend himself. When he tries to locate the attacker, he sees no one, but he sees the ship parked nearby. In an attempt to corner the targets, he manages to hit the ship's door and block the exit. Then he says this is the end because they won't be able to escape using the ship. On the other side, Kim wonders what the enemy meant when he mentioned the Empire. In any case, Apico calls his attention and says she's saving a bit of mana to use in a last resort situation. So she won't be able to use her abilities for a while. She says they'll have to manage without Mina because reaching a specific location requires that her overload be essential. She also says she fought twice just with the mobile team and that wasn't the plan. Meanwhile, Kim doesn't know if Natania abandoned him and ran away. From now on, he imagines he'll have to fight in Apico's place, but he wonders if he'll be able to win. Suddenly, someone appears on the scene. A group prevents the Ice Lord from continuing his attack. He wonders how that happened. When he sees that several men have surrounded him, he says the enemy really went all in on numbers. One of the men says the non-magical transport will begin now and has already been fueled. The Ice Lord asks if the enemy thinks he would care about that. While he talks too much, the two prisoners manage to reach the ship. Desperate, the Ice Lord tries to stop their escape, and even being restrained by several men, he manages to fire. Apico sees this happening and is startled, but the protagonist doesn't want to let that happen and stops her from being hit. After that, the enemy is finally restrained, but he says they will never escape because there is no such thing as senseless justice. He also says that whether it's the Empire or the Kingdom, they only want to use Kim, and it doesn't matter which faction he chooses because his future will be hell. Angrily, the protagonist claims he doesn't care about any of that because his only interest is escaping this prison, a place that subjects people to extreme suffering without reason. Apico sees the protagonist's current state and tries to calm him, but she realizes Kim's rage is about to erupt. He then says that this world is no better than the others. The Ice Lord asks if that's what Kim has to say as someone from Earth, considering he eliminated Princess Natania in the first place. But the protagonist insists that he didn't take her out, and is furious that no one listens to him. Apico tells Kim they are just wasting time, so she tells him to calm down and get started with the transport. With that, Kim boards the ship. Apico says he seems to feel that is being treated very unfairly, but she's here under orders, so she can't reveal much. But she just wanted to say one thing before leaving. In the place they are going now, if they rely only on this kind of thing, they'll end up being eliminated. She says she doesn't know how comfortable Earth is, but tells Kim to keep a level head. And he must always remain calm and composed, because it's better to neutralize than to be neutralized. Using abilities and magic in combat is essential. Escaping after so much effort only to be eliminated as the key would be very sad for everyone. One of the fallen men tells Apico to go and claims this operation was a success. In turn, the Ice Lord apologizes for what he's about to do. Then he uses his powers to freeze the guards who are being controlled and neutralizes them all at once. The protagonist panics at this because now the enemy is free. Not only that, but he wants to stop the ship from taking off. Apico finds herself cornered in this situation and says she didn't expect to have to use her overload. She sees the enemy approaching. Before he could touch the ship, Apico uses her last resort, preventing the enemy from capturing them. The Ice Lord tries to understand what just happened, but deduces that it was the ability called Overload. Exactly the final move of Apico. Relentlessly, he tries to chase after the escaped prisoners. Meanwhile, Apico is bleeding. After all, using that ability drained her last strength. She says she left the ship on autopilot, and that way, they'll manage to escape the prison. Then she tells him to grab the magical tool she stored. Right after that, she collapses and Kim is desperate about it, because he doesn't know what to do until he sees something on top of the ship. The Ice Lord has appeared again to torment him, and says that apparently the side effects are beginning to show. Kim, who was already angry before, gets ready to use his abilities against the enemy. The Ice Lord says that overloading an ability isn't just about overloading the ability itself. As production increases, the amount of mana consumed also increases. Depending on the ability, there may be other costs besides mana, and using it by force when mana is insufficient can be fatal. Those who use it must be prepared for a high-risk, high-reward gamble. If it's not used carefully, it can backfire just like now. Then he tries to break the ship's glass. To the protagonist's despair, the glass starts to crack, and Kim Seo-jun finds himself lost in the middle of it all. He goes over to Apico to try to help her using his ability to do so. However, his ability isn't working. Then he realizes why. Living beings can't be stored in his inventory. Due to this restriction in his ability, he thinks he has no other choice, so he goes to the door knowing that the ship has a parachute system. He quickly opens the emergency exit of the ship, because he knows he has to do this. Soon after, the Ice Lord manages to break the glass. With that, he's free to enter the ship. Then he uses his hook to latch onto the ship and heads for the cockpit. Next, he asks if the prisoners are ready to return to prison, but he doesn't see them. Not only that, but he realizes the automatic system of Gehenna isn't working and wonders if he broke some important device when entering. Either way, he knows he has to catch the fugitive and believes is capable of stopping him. Descending into the cargo hold, he sees an object lying on the floor. So he prepares to fire and throws one of his projectiles at what turned out to be a weapon. But as soon as he did that, something strange started to happen and the Ice Lord was nearly hit. So he suspects the fugitive prisoner might be hiding under the stairs. Thus, he prepares to attack again, but the protagonist anticipates him and electrifies the stairs, delivering a strong shock to the enemy. After that, Kim grabs a weapon and fires in the enemy's direction. The Ice Lord tries to protect himself and uses one of his projectiles as a shield, but even so, he is hit and falls injured to the ground. His projectile remains floating in the air. Kim doesn't really know what's happening. The enemy thinks that even with Kim shooting from that close, he only hit twice and concludes that Kim isn't as accurate as he thought. He says he underestimated him, thinking Kim could only put things in and take them out. But Kim fights better than expected and made a fool of him. The protagonist takes advantage of this opportunity and takes cover before attacking again. This time, he's more protected and keeps shooting. The enemy tries to defend himself again and knocks over some supply crates, but the contents of the crates were flammable and explode when hit by the bullets. Quickly, the Ice Lord uses his hook and goes to the top of the ship. To avoid being harmed by the explosion, the protagonist keeps firing at him. But with the hook's advantage, the Ice Lord maneuvers and uses a ship exit to escape. Kim thinks that shooting a gun is much harder than he expected. Meanwhile, the enemy tells him to drop the weapon and come inside. He's using Apico as a hostage and says he just wants to talk to Kim. Knowing the girl is inside, Kim has no choice but to enter. The Ice Lord says he had a hunch about where his companion might be hiding and claims there's no other place to hide in such a short time other than that room. So he tells Kim to throw his weapon far from the engine room and take a step inside. And if there's even the slightest movement, he'll neutralize him. Kim says that if the girl weren't there, things would be different. But the Ice Lord says she's the only one who knows the plan, so Kim needs her alive. The protagonist doesn't understand how he knows that. But the Ice Lord says he'll delay his execution as much as possible. He also says that the information Apico has is valuable and will be a great help to Gehenna. So if Kim gets lucky, he might avoid execution. Since his plan failed, he asks if Kim doesn't want to know anything. With that, the protagonist drops his weapon and raises both hands. The Ice Lord says he also wanted to end everything as calmly as possible and tells Kim to raise his hands and kneel slowly. If he tries anything, the deal is off, so he must surrender peacefully. Kim says he has no intention of doing anything in this world, because his only desire is to return to his original world. After saying this to the enemy, he uses his abilities against him and catches him completely off guard. Kim charges at the Ice Lord and attacks him without hesitation. He then says that this negotiation is over. Kim opened the cargo disposal compartment. The Ice Lord wonders if Kim is trying to give up or something like that, but he concludes that this is a gamble and Kim is risking his life. A gamble made because there's a slim chance of survival. Still, the enemy thinks that for him, there is a way to survive. The protagonist realizes the enemy is about to act. Immediately after, the Ice Lord moves and tries to escape the fall. Kim tries to stop it from happening, but the enemy acts first and blocks the protagonist's attack. With that, Kim can't fight. The enemy thinks that even though he hasn't used it yet, he can disrupt the gravitational field. And now that things have come to this, he needs to move using mana ignition. The best option would be to use the parachute in the cockpit, and he wonders if Kim is planning to escape with his companion using the parachute. Although they are slowing down with anti-gravity and auxiliary engines, there's still a minute until they hit the ground. Considering the minimum altitude required to use the parachute, Kim appears and interrupts his thoughts. Then the Ice Lord asks what he's doing. The protagonist looks at the enemy and sees through his plan. He activates his ability against the enemy, trying to push him away from the cargo area, but the enemy tries to counter-attack, which causes Kim to lose his balance. Taking advantage of this opening, the Ice Master prepares a dart, leaving Kim slightly alarmed. Because of this distance, if he gets hit, he could be seriously injured until he realizes that the enemy doesn't intend to use the dart, but instead plans to block with an object. The Ice Lord removes what had been stopping him from attacking, and his strength impresses the protagonist until he builds momentum and charges straight at Kim, landing a clean punch to his face and throwing Kim far away. But the punch was so strong that the Ice Lord felt pain in his arm, which had already been injured earlier. Kim thinks it would be easier if he could use mana emission, but he can't avoid what he can't do. So he'll have to face reality and do what he can while he tries to come up with a strategy. The enemy threatens him and throws a projectile in his direction. Kim then thinks there's no other way. So he'll have to block this attack by storing it. In the past, the same thing happened. So now he has the answer to his question. Kim thinks that if there's a possibility of storing an attack, it means he can take that attack out of his inventory and redirect it at his enemy. So that's exactly what he does. When hit by his own attack, the Ice Lord is severely wounded. The protagonist falls to the ground as is still weakened by the blow he received, but his plan worked, and he managed to defeat the enemy. After that, he looks at Apico and realizes she's awake. He then says there are parachutes ready for use, but Apico says she'll only be a burden in her current state and tells him to escape as soon as possible. The protagonist focuses on his sense of resolve, and at that point, he was deliberately ignoring a few things. Why is Natania only in an ethereal state, and why did Natania vanish in the middle of the action? Kim thinks he could make excuses, like being too busy with the prison escape and forgetting. But in any case, the result won't change. However, the result of his choices wasn't very pleasant. Elsewhere, Natania talks to someone and says that the hero really did defeat the mobile team and everything is going exactly as planned. She then asks Shield if it's not time to start moving. Back to the protagonist, he sees Apico being hit by something and doesn't understand how it happened. Natania appears to him and says that won't work, and says he should have learned not to follow strangers around. Kim, in turn, takes off the upper part of his clothing and tries to stop Apico's bleeding, but her wound is very serious. Natania says he could have just stored the outer clothes and skipped a removal process, but Kim immediately took off his clothes to stop the bleeding. Then he imagines he's getting used to the storage abilities. Shiel, however, asks if that's all. He says something is missing from Kim's abilities. The protagonist tries to defend himself, but Shiel says it's pathetic and knocks him to the ground right after. Shiel asks if storage ability is the only power Kim has. Kim wonders what's happening because he can't move. Natania, for her part, says things are getting dangerous. Then Shiel says he forgot and almost fell to his eternal end. He says that Kim's ability is the fuel for bacon. The protagonist has no idea what that is. Either way, as the ship moves, Kim is thrown aside. He feels a sharp headache, and his senses are off soon. He can't tell who is enemy and who is ally. And he asks if he wasn't the only one with storage abilities. Natania says that the unique key or whatever it was doesn't matter. Either way, she won't reveal premature information about the thief, and she asks if Shiel really eliminated her. He says no despite having injured her badly. Therefore, in a minute or two, she'll die from excessive blood loss. Kim asks what is going on and wants to know if Natania still intends to help him return to Earth. She replies that her faith and her goals are no different from Kim's and he could call it a shared destiny. But Kim doesn't believe those words and thinking he's being deceived, he tries to attack. However, his attack is intercepted by Shiel, who quickly stopped Kim from acting. The protagonist thinks that without even a second's delay, the moment he pulled the dart from his inventory, the enemy countered with a rope. As if he had known in advance, Natania tells Kim not to resist as there's no reason for them to fight each other. She also tells Shiel to calm down as they need to preserve the key's integrity. Shiel says he'll do his best, but is not sure he can. Kim realizes that Shiel also has storage abilities, but both powers don't work the same way. He then tries to escape, thinking there's only one way. He quickly picks up a weapon from the ground and starts shooting at them. Shiel says it's not a bad idea, but claims Kim lacks combat experience, so he grabs a shield to block the bullets. Kim disagrees, saying that with it, Shield's field of vision is blocked. Now he can't see from which angle he'll shoot. But Shiel replies that he should have said that earlier and reaffirms that Kim lacks experience because apparently, the miniature mana engine in the weapon he used exploded. Soon, the fragments that hit him must be painful. With that, he says Kim must have noticed that his ability isn't just one. Kim realizes that this guy isn't from behind because if he can see and interact with Natania, it means he's also from Earth. It's an overwhelming skill gap that feels like a wall. The protagonist is left with a question. If they are the same, then how many years has he been in this world? Natania says that Shell's ability is to copy. But even though it's a special ability, it has a usage limit. The original ability user must stay alive, which is why they need Kim. With that, the protagonist is overtaken by a feeling of déjà vu. The fear and hope feel very familiar. The ability to copy powers and unknowingly. The storage ability was also copied. The only person who can do that is someone he already knows. The effect of the ability, the way to use it. Looking back at this moment, Kim says he should have realized it sooner, claiming that the one who trapped him in Gehenna started with him. Shiel says that Kim is finally using his head. Then the protagonist is attacked, but he manages to notice in time and prepares for what's coming. Kim distances himself from the enemy. Meanwhile, Apico is on the verge of death and says this is her end. Memories of her past arise and her life flashes before her eyes. She remembers being ordered to return alive, but she thinks that doesn't matter now. However, she concludes there's no time for games and tries to make her brain work properly. Apico thinks the final enemy is likely the opposing group on the other side and must be the Kingdom Alliance. She wonders where they were hiding and also asks herself if they randomly picked one of the airships in this terrible situation. Where, when, and how they got into this ship is also a mystery. Apico also wonders if the enemy is alone or part of a larger group. Either way, the protagonist is in trouble and the enemy is about to defeat him. As the enemy approaches Kim, the girl sees a weapon lying on the ground and also deduces that the enemy's ability allows him to see the future, because only that would explain how he knew which airship they boarded and that they were hiding above the cargo hold. Apico wonders if she's just a puppet in a predestined future. And what if failure was inevitable? She had accepted her fate a long time ago, but at the very least, she wants to save Kim Seo-jun. Therefore, she wants to play this game to the end. The protagonist tries to face the enemy, but ends up being cornered by him because Shiel grabbed him by the neck, preventing Kim from saying anything. Kim doesn't understand why, but soon after, the enemy is hit by a shot. Apico says she won't die without doing something. She activates her overload as this is her final move and says that if she's going to lose, she'd rather do it in the most disruptive way possible. The enemy who was holding Kim hostage lets him drop to the floor of the ship. Natania asks what he's doing and orders him to kill the girl and protect the hero, but Shiel says that's enough and he wants to escape. He claims that everything will be destroyed in 15 seconds. Kim, hearing this, gets worried about Apico. Shiel says there are 6 seconds left before the teleporter becomes unusable and they won't be able to escape. Natania then asks if she'll force this situation. He doesn't answer and simply activates the teleporter. Then Natania says goodbye to Kim, but says they'll meet again. After that, Apico says she always wanted to meet the hero and has admired him since childhood because she believes he's the only one who can save this rotten world, the true hero among them. So she asks him to do it and save the world. Then a massive explosion of energy erupts in the area. Sometime after this event, a meeting takes place among the prison representatives. The person in charge receives a message saying there was a breach in Gehenna. Silence falls over the room, but he asks how the prison warden is going to deal with it. He says Gehenna prison is known for being impenetrable, having never been invaded. And now that it's lost that status, someone must take responsibility. But the head of the patrol team says that's nonsense and states that the leader is holding a pointless hearing when they are so busy and is the one preventing them from doing anything. Then he claims the old man is sick and asks if he wants the others to end up like him. The leader says is concerned about the prison warden's judgment and asks if her subordinate is in his right mind. She replies that although her subordinate is from Earth, he is trustworthy. Then the leader says they'll end the hearing here, claiming that seeing them makes him feel 10 older. He also says that a plan to capture the escaped convict will soon be put into action and the group of heroes will also be involved. In any case, he tells the prison warden that someone has to take responsibility. Angrily, she says this was planned from the beginning and that she's being used as a scapegoat. The head of the patrol group says he's tired of the alliance between the Empire and the Kingdom and asks when they are going to unite and fight for their own interest. First, it was the war with the demons. Now it's humans fighting each other. The warden says it's all a calculated setup, excluding her and the head of the patrol. She also says they need to clean up this mess first and schedule a meeting with the executives. She wants to make sure the entire 6th floor strike team is present because they need to find Kim Seo-jun as soon as possible. Back at the prison, the bodies of the eliminated guards are being collected while the wounded are being treated. Many die trying to prevent the prisoners from escaping. The patrol chief receives the report, and the numbers leave him furious. Not only that, but among those who died was one of his own, Amber. The warden says the issue of the deceased's immediate family and the treatment of the injured has already been resolved, so she wants to move to the next topic for now. She claims the most important thing now is to figure out how they breached Gehenna's security. The testing room has a system to prevent the use of magic, so she asks how they managed to bypass that and use skills and magic. Because in that room, magic can't be used anywhere except in the tube at the center. Even if you try to use skills or magic, it sparks and shuts down. That's why the guards in the testing room are basically armed with magical weapons. First, she wants to try establishing a timeline with the data they gathered. She says the intruder's name is Apico, who has a distortion ability. Along with her was a male imp with shadow ability and the carriers. First, an infected human with a swarm ability made contact with a Gehenna guard. They were probably targeting guards who were on vacation. After that, the shadow infiltrated the guard's quarters while he was on vacation. Apparently, they were placed in a location without proper security facilities. The others are confused by so much information, but the director tells them to be quiet and listen to the rest. She says that after that, they returned to Gehenna and underwent a standard physical and mental evaluation. However, observing several circumstances, it appears they were hosting a shadow ability user within their internal organs. This exact part is the most important. They used a swarm ability to disable the test room security, control the guards, and shut down the device. They really planned and infiltrated it. The director wonders if their enemies are planning a war again. She thinks neither the kingdom nor the empire is prepared, so the higher-ups must be insane. After that, she asks what the mobile team thinks about it. Aaron from the 6th floor operations team says the sun will rise at this rate and believes all of this is the Empire's fault. Caleb from the same team says he agrees with that statement. Serene doesn't know what to say, while Mummy is asleep and not paying attention to the meeting. Cecilia, on the other hand, thinks it's the kingdom's side since they are the ones trying to secure the key before the Empire. Zetra agrees with that opinion. The only one from the team who doesn't give an opinion is Amber since she died in combat. Aaron apologizes for saying that, but asks if the most important thing isn't capturing the fugitive. The people in the meeting sort of agree. The prison director agrees as well and says the order has already been given. Lee Tai-hyun says he discovered the location about 8 kilometers from Gehenna 3 hours ago. With that, he wants to neutralize Kim Seo-jun because he blames him for eliminating his colleague and wants revenge. The director asks if he plans to handle it personally. Lee says yes. She says she can't allow that as they'd already lost 2 members of the mobile team, something that was inevitable. Because Isaac wasn't good at combat, and Amber was just a rookie who had only just begun training, they didn't stand a chance. The director says Lee knows that too, and in the kind of work they do, casualties are inevitable. It was Amber and Isaac's turn. Lee gets upset upon hearing that, but he knows the director is right. So he calls Cyrene and Momi, telling them both to handle this and work together with the hero group. Momi says this job is boring. Cyrene, however, doesn't intend to refuse. So Momi stands up and says that if it's to avenge a colleague, she'll do the job. Far from there, a source of energy appears, and from within it, Shale emerges. Immediately, Natania demands an explanation, wanting to know why he fled in the middle of the mission. Since Shale didn't eliminate the thief and abandon the hero, she also asks why the operation overrode the empires. Shale replies that they had to move there. He says the princess should know there are two keys. One is the Sword of Light, and the other is the token. Among them, the token is a problem they couldn't solve. Overload from the original storage ability. This is something Kim has to resolve. Natania says that was handled before the summoning, and if it doesn't work, they can extract the ability and force it to accelerate. Shell says that Kim has a better way to acquire the overload. The princess says she's not convinced. Either way, she agrees to continue, but she tells him not to forget that his goal must be achieved in order for her to help him. Since Shell's desire is to return to Earth, Shell says she's hitting a sore spot, but tells her to calm down as is certain Kim is alive. Speaking of him, the protagonist wakes up in a mysterious place. Not only that, but he realizes he's tied up and doesn't understand how he ended up in this situation until some people approach. One of them is a doctor who is happy to see Kim finally awake. They still don't know each other, but the doctor asks if Kim is having any trouble seeing. The protagonist wonders who these people are and is unsure if he's still in Gehenna or in some hospital out there. He thinks that first, he needs to break free and then run away from there. The lizard man says there's something strange in the foreigner's eyes as he seems to have many complaints. The doctor says he warned them not to tie him up, but the lizard says they can't just let a human from Earth roam free. For his part, Kim manages to activate his abilities and breaks the rope that was tying him up. Both are quite surprised by this. However, the protagonist just wants to escape. He takes advantage of this moment of distraction and stores the bed he was lying on in his inventory. Once free from the restraints, he runs away from those people. Meanwhile, the doctor tells his colleague not to do anything because he'll handle it. Kim runs as fast as he can and wonders where he is since the last thing he remembers is the explosion of the ship, which was also the last time he saw Apico. Shortly after, the doctor chases after him, insisting that Kim stop running. The protagonist realizes the doctor has powers and runs much faster than normal, but the doctor manages to catch up to him and prevents Kim from continuing to run. After that, the doctor pins him to the ground, saying that Kim can't just go around running aimlessly. First, he wants Kim to calm down, but the protagonist is still scared and wants to flee. So he uses his ability to open a hole in the floor and falls with the doctor to the hospital's lower level. By doing that, he finds himself in an awkward situation because there are some people being treated in this room as well, receiving treatment just like Kim. They are also confused to see someone falling from the ceiling, but Kim only thinks about escaping as fast as he can. Before he starts running again, he is stopped. A girl with powers hits him and throws Kim away. The protagonist is surprised by this because she also has magical powers, but he thinks this woman is not as strong as the mobile team and he needs to draw her close somehow in order to neutralize her. Somehow, he feels he can do it. After all, he already neutralized two. Besides, he promised he would escape and would do anything for that. Kim hears this as if someone were whispering those words in his ear until the doctor appears shortly after and interrupts the fight between them, saying that Kim is a foreigner who came from another world. So it's natural that he's confused by all of this. The protagonist realizes that the doctor is aware of what's going on, unlike himself. Again, the doctor tells Kim to calm down and apologizes for the rude behavior of his friends. Kim asks where he is and how long he was unconscious. The doctor replies that this is the 17th pioneer village of the kingdom, but since Kim just arrived, he should just think of it as a different world. To the protagonist, this makes no sense. Kim wonders if they think he's a human from Earth who just fell into another world. He remembers the prison warden said something like, this too besides the hero summoning. So apparently, there are humans from Earth falling into other worlds. Kim asks again how long he was unconscious. The doctor says this may be shocking, but reveals that Kim was unconscious for 3 days. At the site where the ship wreckage fell, the Gehenna patrol is conducting a search. Momi says the kingdom's alliance mobilized all its manpower. Serene, meanwhile, is conducting an experiment and focuses on it while Momi speaks. Soon, her focus is limited to that, but Mummy grabs the doll from her colleague's hand, saying it's quite strange all this trouble with the traders in Gehenna, and asks if they are being investigated too. In a careless act with the doll, she ends up dropping it into the water. Then a strange man appears and arrives using his abilities. Apparently, he can energize objects aiming directly at the fallen doll. Moni is shocked to see this. No different from her, Serene is also surprised. the stranger picks up the fallen doll and joins his team, saying they are the hero team. Before becoming a hero, the young man was just a regular student who was brought to this world out of nowhere. Just like the protagonist, he arrived from nothing. At the time, he saw Kim Seo-joon celebrating being in this world and quickly felt something different. Because his powers from this world started to manifest, Princess Natania was analyzing Kim when he began to play with his powers and even materialized a card. However, he was confused by such an ability. In his mind, it was as if this ability had always been there. And the moment he activated it, his brain assimilated everything, even how to use it. And he knew the princess was analyzing their abilities. But when he looked at her, he no longer saw Natania in front of him, because everything was just a blur. The young man fainted, and when he regained consciousness, he felt a strong headache. Right after that, he saw Kim Seo-joon being arrested and didn't know why until then. Kim insisted he hadn't done anything, but the young man couldn't help. Back in the present, our hero recalls that moment. While analyzing the surrounding environment, he is now part of the hero team and is there to assist in the search. The hero says he's there because he was sent to help, but says he didn't expect to have a stray dog as an operation partner. His colleague says he should show good manners when meeting people for the first time. However, the hero disagrees, claiming that it was those people who called for them. So they should be the ones showing respect, since as heroes, they are superior. When he throws the doll towards Serene, she ducks and picks it up, but glares at the hero with disdain. With that, he asks why he should show respect or consideration for these people. Either way, he asks what the reason is for being there since he hurried to arrive and didn't hear the full story. Momi says that for someone who arrived quickly, he took a whole day to travel. The hero says the only thing he knew was that the task was to track a fugitive prisoner because he heard from the king that they were to blame for the mess and asks why he has to help clean up someone else's mess. Moni explains what happened in detail and says that, as they can see, most of the wreckage has settled, making it very difficult to track any trace. Because of this incident, one of the detainees with an ability to detect such things died, and that's why she'd like him to use the hero group's ability. The hero then tells his team to get to work. Right after, the tracker begins to act and goes to the water to try to find something. After analyzing the environment reading, he uses his memory reading ability and his other skills. He also says he'll project the past so the mobile team can observe as well. Then he passes what he saw to his colleague, and he projects the gathered information like a hologram. The bald one says it's impossible to know what happened inside the nonlinear space since only the surface is visible. So he decides to go back to just before the explosion. Momi watches the hero team act and admits their abilities are quite useful. Then she sees something and is surprised as she can visualize someone falling from the ship during the accident. She gets frightened by the vision and calls this phenomenon a jump. The hero asks what that means. She explains that the jump phenomenon is a rare occurrence when using space-time abilities in an unstable space-time. Literally, nearby humans are randomly thrown through time and space, and this one seems to have been caused by the release of a distortion ability. In other words, the convict they were chasing wasn't hit by the explosion. He fell into the near past. Speaking of him, the protagonist goes for a walk and is taken to the place where he appeared. The lizard man says he was found there near a village of cultivators. Kim wonders how that happened since he doesn't understand how he ended up in the middle of nowhere after the ship exploded. He wonders what he's doing in this forest until the girl from before shows up and says Princess Natania has called a press conference and is about to summon a hero. During the interview, the reporter asks why the princess decided to summon not one, but 4 heroes and reminds everyone that the kingdom was a victim of the God Mode incident in the past. Natania replies that the uncontrolled summoning of heroes 9 years ago led to a massacre. The Kingdom Alliance hasn't forgotten the damage caused by the Empire. However, the Alliance of Kingdoms is very weak in power, which is why it was determined that heroes are necessary. The reporter says they are not in a war situation, then states that the public's reaction will be fierce. At another moment, Kim asks for the explanation once more. The lizard man says this isn't his story and asks why Kim cares. The protagonist tells him to just tell the story. Then the lizard man says this hero summoning is nearly the first in 9 years and summoning 4 at once is unprecedented. And there's never been an incident like the elimination of the princess. Before continuing, he asks if Kim is okay, as his head still seems to be recovering. The protagonist wonders what happened. Because Natania is alive and well, and no hero was summoned, it's as if he returned to the past. Then he wonders if the cause might have been Apico's self-destruction. With all this, Kim feels as if he died and ended up in the afterlife. Then the lizard says the tour is over, and it's time to return since there are dangerous monsters nearby. A few days after the press conference, Kim is ready to have his bandages removed. The doctor says regenerative medicine has sped up the healing process, but there's still a risk of infection, so he needs to apply ointment. He also says the scars are inevitable and surgery might be the only option to remove them. The protagonist says he looks ugly, but doesn't care. Then the doctor mentions that they had to cut Kim's hair during the treatment, but Kim says it's fine since hair grows back. For him, the most important thing is returning to Earth, and he asks if the doctor knows any way to do that. For the doctor, it's hard to explain. He asks Kim to be a little patient and says it's practically impossible to return. After that, he asks if Kim knows what a fish trap it is, like a net. The dimensional portal that connects Earth to this other world has a similar structure. That's why it's possible to come from Earth to this world, but not the other way around. The protagonist understands, but asks if it's not possible to create or modify a portal because expanding or changing the conditions of one would already help. The doctor says everything suggests the portal was created around 2,000 years ago. Kim realizes from that the technology in this world is very old. Continuing, the doctor says that theoretically it's possible to break the portal, but it would require a massive energy source. In other words, it could lead to the destruction of worlds. Kim understands that returning to Earth won't be possible. He says he understands and thanks the doctor for the explanation. The doctor regrets not having better news for him, but tells Kim to try not to hate this world too much. Although this place is chaotic at times, it's still home to many people. And with time, Kim might learn to live here too. The protagonist leaves the doctor's office, still thinking about returning home. He remembers that after asking her if she could send him back to Earth, Natania said their goals weren't different from Kim's. With that, he wonders what she meant by that, and if there really is no way to return to Earth. Elsewhere, the warrior girl is training. She and her training partner are using wooden swords, and due to a slip-up, she ends up losing the sparring match. Her master is trying to teach her something. He says that if she's under his command as a mercenary, she should be able to hold out for at least 3 minutes. Traces of monsters have been found nearby, biological weapons left by the demon race. He still doesn't know what drew them here, but there's also a leader among them. So if she lets her guard down for even a second, she'll die. His apprentice says she understands. Watching the mercenaries stationed in the village, Kim thinks that if possible, he wants to build good relations with this side because he needs more information, especially about things like mana discharge since he needs to find a way to increase his own power. It makes it feel like he's trying to raise the favorability of an NPC in an RPG game, which is exactly what he's worst at. Night falls and the protagonist goes to sleep. He has been relocated to his own resting place. But while he's lying in bed, the mercenary apprentice slowly approaches and her intentions are far from friendly. Moments before, the protagonist had been testing his power and was trying to control a stone. He didn't get the result he wanted, but managed to learn more about how his abilities work. He concluded that he can't use gravitational force to throw objects at enemies because there's a delay in materialization of items precisely at the moment he takes them out of his inventory. Kim discovered that it's possible to store gases, but that's not very useful to him. The volume he can store at once is about 2 cubic meters, but he'd like to know if it's possible to store air for an invisible attack. But gases and liquids not contained in a vessel can only be stored in very small amounts. Additionally, they disperse immediately upon being taken out. In the end, after repeatedly trying to store things, he realized his own limits and the storage capacity restrictions of the inventory, which has only 1,000 slots and is not infinite as he had imagined. From using his abilities so much, Kim began to feel magical exhaustion. And as he kept filling the supposedly infinite inventory, a warning appeared. Indeed, his storage ability is strange. For a world without stats or levels, it feels very artificial. And he suspects there must be a reason for that, until suddenly, he hears a strange noise and realizes someone is approaching. Right after that, the mercenary apprentice appears and finds Kim lying on his bed. She approaches the protagonist, but since he was only pretending to be asleep, he took the opportunity to put his skills into practice. And with that, he pulls something out of his inventory, pushing the girl away from him. She is completely startled by what she sees as a hooded man appears in front of her, exactly one of the prison guards from where Kim had been held. She asks who this man is and when she tries to attack him, she fails since it was just an illusion. Kim took advantage of the opportunity to distract her and catch his opponent off guard. With that, he successfully attacks her by surprise. The girl realizes what's happening and tries to think of a way to counterattack, but the protagonist anticipates her and tells her not to even try. Kim asks why she tried to eliminate him. Meanwhile, he thinks that this is not good at all, since after using the special team's stored ability during the fight, he was left almost without magic and barely has enough left for 2 more uses. In turn, the girl says it was a misunderstanding and she's not there to neutralize him, but to protect him. The protagonist doesn't understand why since the way she appeared suggested otherwise. Either way, they hear a noise. Kim asks what that means as he hears the sound of bells ringing. Before he could get an answer, a creature invades his room. He's startled by it. Not just him, the mercenary apprentices too. And now the 2 of them will have to face this monster. The creature tries to attack first. But before that, the girl charges at it and strikes the monster ahead of time, slicing off the fangs on its paw. Kim is impressed by the monster because he was expecting goblins or slimes like in the fantasies he knows. But instead, a bizarre dinosaur showed up, completely opposite of his expectations. He also notices that the creature is targeting him and doesn't understand why. Either way, he knows he'll have to protect himself. The girl tells him to aim for the core in the creature's belly. She stabs the dinosaur in the hind leg. This makes the monster expose its core. That way, Kim knows where to strike. So he uses his ability to hit the creature directly, and he does so. He attacks the monster, but ends up trapped under the dinosaur since he was on the ground. After that, blood begins to drip from Kim's nose because he used too much of his magical ability. The girl asks if he's okay, but before they can rest, another creature appears and attacks. She is frightened by the situation. Not much different from her, Kim is anxious. The creature comes from the lower floor and immediately starts attacking both of them, but its main target is exactly the protagonist, just like the previous creature. The mercenary apprentice was sent there to protect Kim, so she steps forward and shields him. But right after, the protagonist sees that the doctor and some nurses were not so lucky and concludes that before coming for him, the enemy must have taken out any potential obstacles. Soon, he realizes he's facing something stronger than just a wild beast until suddenly, he hears Shiol speaking. The enemy says that Kim is not a hero in a video game, and the people lying dead before him are not NPCs. He asks if Kim feels guilt or regret, and tells him to reflect on the treatment he's received in this other world since he arrived. He also says he knows that to escape this world, Kim would do anything. The protagonist can only think that he has to get out of there. He quickly gets up and starts running away from the creature. In another moment, the mercenary apprentice asks if a single earthling could really cause that much damage. The lizard man says he was watching while Kim claimed he was going to train or something, but he's never heard of an ability like that. The girl says it's definitely brutal. She sees some footprints on the ground and thinks something dangerous was there. Back to the moment of the battle, the protagonist runs from the creature. But to his surprise, the monster is faster than he expected. Kim is about to be attacked, but manages to dodge at the last second. However, he is grazed by the creature. He thinks that in Souls-like games, rolling on the ground always helps. But in practice, it didn't work very well for him. Kim decides he won't run anymore and intends to face his end head-on, but to escape even having decided to do whatever it takes. Even if he's from another world, the person who helped him cannot just be abandoned. Meanwhile, a fierce battle unfolds. The girl fights the creature at full power, but the monster doesn't make it easy for her. She analyzes the enemy's combat pattern and realizes it uses a magical teleportation pattern. She also notices that the monster's intention is not to eliminate her because its target is someone else. However, the monster also doesn't want to lose to her, so it teleports whenever it's about to be attacked and tries to flank her, moving to her rear. When the monster gets into a favorable position, it attacks with the intent to hit her. The girl prepares to counter-attack and doesn't let the creature get too close. She manages to deliver several attacks in different directions, but it leaves her very exhausted. The monster bleeds from its wounds and becomes vulnerable. Noticing all of this from a distance, the protagonist finally decides to vac. He then pulls a massive block from his inventory and uses it against the creature. This causes major damage to the monster, but it wasn't enough to neutralize it. The girl, realizing that Kim was put in danger, gets him out of the creature's sight and throws him far away. In the process, the monster loses one of its arms and becomes very angry at the protagonist. Kim notices this, but senses something strange because the creature is watching him closely with a serious gaze. For 10 years, it acted autonomously, avoiding combat as much as possible in line with the commands implanted in its mind, focusing solely on its own survival. The command was overwritten a day ago in a place where a faint trace of magic carried through the nasal cavity seemed to be piercing somewhere in the brain. The command was updated. This resurgence of memory designates Delta 1. It has found the arch-enemy. He is now the highest priority target for elimination, and Delta 1 received the order to eliminate him. The target's physical abilities are not exceptional, but his attack power is presumably extremely high. The creature beside him has high physical capabilities, but its attack power is not threatening. With that, Delta 1 made its decision. Back in the battle, the two noticed the creature's power surging. Delta 1 watches them and launches a massive attack against them, but its target is very clear. Kim Seo-jun didn't come out on top this time, because the creature's attack broke his protector's sword and also hit her square in the chest. After the creature's attack, the sound of battle can be heard from afar. Nearby, the lizard man fights another monster. He sees the creature and immediately charges into attack, but the monster is fleeing and shows no interest in fighting anymore. Only to the monster's misfortune, another warrior appears to face it and quickly catches it off guard, landing a direct hit. The mercenary slashes the monster with his sword and even uses magical abilities to cause an explosion within the enemy, and thus, monster blood splatters everywhere. Afterward, he asks how many are left, and the lizard man says only 2. The mercenary says they need to defeat the monster leader. He even set up a barrier, but if it fails, they could end up dying. Back to the protagonist, he and his bodyguard were hit. The blow they took caused serious injuries, making Kim Seo-jun collapse to the ground because he's losing a lot of blood. More and more, he realizes just how dangerous this new world is. He thinks that while he was in prison, the worst part was the boredom since he had no access to any entertainment. For him, it's strange to feel excited about falling into this world because he has no friends, no family, no connections, and no bond. Besides, the safety here is a joke, and Kim wonders why these strange creatures are wandering around. He doesn't understand how he ended up in this situation, which by the way is extremely unpleasant. Kim feels like he's been stumbling around without knowing why, and he didn't even get to punch Natania once. And now he's ended up caught by some strange creature. After that, he looks to the side and tells the girl to use her teleportation ability to get them out of there. She says it's possible, but there's a catch. Kim tells her to place him behind the monster. The girl doesn't quite understand the plan, but the protagonist tells her to trust him. Even without understanding what he's planning, she uses her ability on Kim and teleports him behind the creature. The monster even senses Kim's presence. Instinctively, Kim feels that if he uses the storage ability one more time, he'll end up dying like Apico, until the voice speaks to him again and asks if storage is the only ability Kim has. Now the protagonist understands why Sheil thought he was inexperienced, so he wants to try to change. Kim can vaguely feel the magic forming. Even if it's weak, it's fine for him, because he believes he can release the magic. With all that conviction, he attacks the monster. But due to being injured, it only worsens his condition. Either way, the creature feels the blow. Apparently, Delta 1 had its internal organs hit and immediately died seemingly from cardiac arrest. The protagonist who achieved such a feat can barely move properly. He believes the creature is defeated, but sees an energy emanating from the fallen monster's body. And with that, he becomes worried that the monster might get up again. However, the mercenary appears and lands the final blow on the monster, thus preventing any attempt by the creature to rise again. After that, he approaches Kim and asks if he's still alive. Kim is practically unconscious, and the mercenary saw that he gambled everything on a single strike, and says that it's just like the prince said earlier. The protagonist hears this and asks what he's talking about. In response, the mercenary says they can continue this conversation when Kim wakes up. Previously, the mercenary received word that soon, a foreigner from Earth would appear in a place called the 17 Pioneer Village, and that was all the prince knew at the time. Therefore, he ordered the mercenary to lead his subordinates and infiltrate the kingdom, even allowing the use of his apprentice, because his duty was to protect this person and training them wouldn't be a bad idea either. The mercenary was surprised that His Highness had another vision, but warned that the enemy's identity still hadn't been confirmed. However, His Highness told him not to worry and to trust that everything would work out. After all, this is the kind of ability that never fails. Back to the present, the town doctor recovers and says he never imagined being in such a situation since he normally treats people not the other way around. Kim says that at least no one died and feels relieved about that. In turn, the doctor says he really thought he was going to die, but thanks Kim for not letting that happen since he risked his life to face a monster from another world, and he didn't even have to be from Earth and not a local. Kim asks what happened to the girl who was with him. The doctor says her name is Senari. Before he can explain, the mercenary shows up saying he needs to speak with Kim and asks the doctor to leave them alone for a moment. He also says it will be as quick as possible. After the doctor leaves, the mercenary gets ready since he had promised to talk with Kim as soon as he woke up. He asks if Kim rested well. After all, the wound he suffered was severe. In turn, the protagonist asks if the mercenaries from the Empire. The man quickly realizes that Kim wants to get straight to the point. He says that this attack happened due to the traces of Kim's manner, and adds that he left quite a mess in that place. The monsters that attacked him are attracted by the hero's manner, and claims that only those who've been in the war know that, so Kim can rest easy. Kim says he had no idea. The mercenary says he didn't mention it, so as not to blame Kim, but wants to emphasize the importance of that information, and says it only happened because Kim didn't know. The protagonist asks how the mercenary knew he was the hero. The man replies that his prince has a very peculiar ability. He also says the invaders are from another world, a demonic race that designed those monstrous bioweapons. That's the true identity of those creatures. The protagonist says he didn't expect that story, and asks if on top of that, there's also a demon king or a demon continent. The mercenary thinks for a moment and says that, yes, there is something similar. He asks if Kim has ever heard of this world's dimensional connection with Earth. The protagonist says, yes. With that, he says Kim must already know that the reason they can't adjust the size of the gateway is because the technology doesn't originate from this world. 2,000 years ago, the people of this world copied the gate that the demonic race crossed through. They merely replicated it. After hearing that, Kim says it sounds a bit irresponsible and asks why they bring people from Earth to fight a war in an unknown world. He also says that now he realizes he was actually kidnapped, but the mercenary says it's actually the opposite. It's not that they summon people from Earth, but when they did it, it turned out to be someone from Earth. He reveals that the story he's told so far is in textbooks, but from here, he goes much deeper. The reason why Earthlings are summoned as heroes, the reason why Kim was summoned is because he can see souls. At first, Kim thinks this is pure nonsense, like a simple excuse to bring Earthlings into this unknown world. But then he remembers Natania. He also remembers that she herself said Kim could only see her in that form because he was from Earth. The mercenary notices that Kim is coming to terms with reality. But before he says more, Kim wants to emphasize a detail. He then asks if the enemies are of the demon race. The mercenary says that actually, they are also part of the Royal Alliance, but is trying to find out if there is demon involvement through Kim who fell from the future. Demons can transform into spirits after death, and if the body is prepared for them, they can be revived. If demons in the kingdom have joined forces, it will be very dangerous. The protagonist agrees to cooperate, but not for free. He demands to be trained in a short time, wants to meet the prince, and says the mercenary has to fight alongside him in a certain event. In turn, the mercenary says the third request is beyond his authority and asks what event that would be. Kim says he wants to stop Natania from bringing a new hero into this world. Somewhere far from there, Shield lies on a stretcher, and on his chest, there is a clock, which is counting down. When it reaches 0, he wakes up. A man asks if he had a good dream. Shield says yes, although it lasted only 3 minutes. The man says it's hard to experience anything while avoiding the princess's eyes. Shield says it wouldn't have been possible without his ability. With that, the man says he needs to use his brain if he wants to survive. Shiloh agrees and states that their survival is the highest priority. Back to the protagonist, he is getting ready. Kim puts on training gear. His trainer says this is the armor of beginner mercenary and asks if it's to Kim's liking. He says yes. However, the master says Kim looks disappointed. He also says that Kim will thank him later, and now he must run 50 laps around the area. The protagonist is shocked by this. His master says Kim asked to be trained, so he must follow orders. But Kim says he didn't think it would start like this. His master says if he doesn't do it, he'd better prepare to die. Kim is startled by this, and his master asks why he's scared. The protagonist says that as a Korean, it's not good to hear that. In any case, the master says he'll be right behind Kim and will keep his eyes on him while he runs. With that, Kim starts running, thinking it shouldn't be that hard. But he quickly realizes he was wrong, as he's nearly dying on the ground. His master says he hasn't even completed half the course. Then the lizard man appears and says that apparently, they'll have to clean up a dead body. The mercenary asks how Sanari is doing. He replies that Sanari is being prepared to use a prosthetic arm, and it will take some time before she returns to combat. Upon hearing about the girl who helped him, Kim says it's a relief to know she'll return to the fight even after everything that happened. The master says that if Kim can talk, it means he still has energy to spare, and now they'll run back to the village. Kim runs even though he's really tired. His master tells him to keep going until he completes the course. He also says that to make things more interesting, he'll give Kim some special literature when he finishes. Kim says that doesn't sound boring at all. The master says he's probably wondering why he's running so much and explains that endurance is the most important thing in a fight. Kim understands since he knows that strengthening muscles with mana still requires stamina. Exactly. His master says that's why maintaining endurance is even more important. Also, he knows Kim is the type who bets everything on a single strike. The protagonist remembers that's exactly what he did in his last fight. Thinking back, when he used to play FPS games in Korea, he only used shotguns and revolvers with high damage per shot. Remembering the past, he misses those days. His master tells Kim Seo-jun to stop complaining and that he has to keep running until he lands that strike. Despite the crude name and type of power, if he misses the timing of his attack, it could lead to eternal death. On that note, Kim asks if there's a type of technique that has strength through attack frequency, and another type of power that has strength through damage. His master says he's well informed and asks where Kim heard that. He replies it was from a woman he'd like to punch if he saw her again. Either way, the master says the protagonist's mana level is slightly above average, but states that he still has much to learn, and Kim is still far from being fully capable. Kim asks if the master really had to bring that up now. His master says yes, since he's going to be running until dawn, so he's warning him now. In another place and in another timeline, the hero leading the search team says he's dying of boredom. The fact that time zones are different means one thing. Even after tracking the traces, they might lead to another place. Such information demotivates the team a little. However, the hero says they must not overlook the details. After that, the driver stops the car and parks in the middle of the road. He says they finally reached the destination and everyone can get out of the vehicle now. After getting out, the hero feels like he's going to throw out from nausea. Even so, he's determined to capture Kim Seo-jun because by doing that, he can go back quickly and return home.